Welcome to Study Session 11, Psychological Tests in Guidance and Counseling. Introduction. In this study session, you will learn about psychological tests, the classification of psychological tests, the functions and uses of psychological tests, and also test selection, administration and interpretation. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this session, you should be able to 1. Define psychological tests. 2. Discuss the classification of psychological tests. 3. Highlight the functions and uses of psychological tests. 4. Explain test selection, administration and interpretation. Concept and nature of psychological tests. A psychological test can be defined as a set of standard stimuli, questions, puzzles, exercises, and so on, presented to the individual, a learner, a client, or other persons in order to assess the person's behavior. Some psychological tests, like projective or personality tests, cannot be necessarily described as standardized tests. Denga, 1981, however, said that an ideal psychological test should be that which has been standardized, a standardized test. This is a test that has been constructed according to strict psychometric principles and which also contains standard items, similar conditions for administration and similar conditions for scoring, interpretation, and is norm referenced, which means it must have been administered to a norm group or groups so that an individual's score is compared to the scores of the norm group or groups. According to Denga, there are different norms like the Joint Admission and Matriculations Board, JAMB, entrance examinations into first degree, as well as local norms like the state entrance examinations into state post-primary institutions. Difference between ordinary tests and standardized or psychological tests. One of the notable differences between an ordinary test and standardized or psychological test is that ordinary test is not a standardized test. It does not contain standard set of stimuli and has not been prepared according to strict psychometric principles. Therefore, it cannot be used for counseling because it will not be valid and reliable. Examples of this test include the teacher-made test, the type used in the normal classroom teaching and learning situations. Some personality tests also fall into this category. Nature of psychological tests. Psychological tests that contain standard set of items could be of different nature. These: 1. Oral test. This is when the test is given orally and verbally to the client, with the assurance that this will not affect the characteristics of the test. For example, most validated interview fall into this group of tests. 2. Performance test. Here, certain stimuli are presented to the individual to react to, while the tester observes using a norm or other standard criteria for judgment. For example, tests used in selecting the best dancer, the best athlete, and even the best grass cutter. 3. Written. Here, the standard stimuli are written and the testee's reaction or response is put down in written too. Most psychological tests are in this category. Examples include the various scales, inventories, and questionnaires used by psychologists and counselors. Classification of psychological tests. Psychological tests are classified on the basis of what they are out to test. Hence, there are 6 basic types of tests which can be used by the school counselor in a guidance and counseling program. These tests are: 1. Mental agility or intelligence test. 2. Achievement test. 3. Aptitude test. 4. Interest test. 5. Personality test. 6. Attitude test. 1. Mental ability or intelligence test. Mental ability or intelligence consists of a number of skills which are called cognitive skills. They are mental skills like perception, conception, memory, language, reasoning, and creativity. These are basic cognitive skills. Mental ability test is therefore a test for tapping these skills. Examples include Cattell's Intelligence Test for Babies, Griffin's Intelligence Test for Babies, WPPSI, Wechsler's Preschool and Primary Scale of Intelligence for Children 3 to 5 years, WSC, Wechsler's Intelligence Scale for Children, WAIS, Wechsler's Adult Intelligence Scale, Stanford Binet Test Intelligence. Binet is the first psychologist to devise an intelligence scale in the 1905 to separate children who cannot benefit from classroom instruction. This test was later modified by an American psychologist known as Stanford, hence the name Stanford Binet Test of Intelligence. Progressive matrices. Then we have local examples. In an attempt to solve the problem of scarcity of psychological tests and heavy dependence on foreign ones, which may not adequately tap what they are purported to tap in our clients, Nigerian psychologists have come up with a number of locally constructed psychological tests. Those that measure mental ability include 1. The Visual Memory Test by CMG Bakari. 2. Perception of Details Test by CMG Bakari. 3. African Picture Arrangement Kits by CMG Bakari. 4. Ibadan Creativity Assessment Skill ICAS by G.O. Akimboyi. 5. Personal Creativity Motivational Inventory PCMI by G.O. Akimboyi. 6. Intelligence for Nigerian Children, a Child Delinquency Tendency Inventory by B.S. Adana. 7. Self-Scoring Intelligence Test by Akin Odebumi. 9. Adaptive Ways of Using the Wechsler's Test of Intelligence for Adults. 2. Achievement Test. Achievement test measures students' performance after a specified course of instruction. That is, it measures students' mastery of a particular content such as geography, mathematics, science, and economics. It measures what has been achieved after the course. This type of test is mostly constructed by teachers in various teaching subjects, but a standardized achievement test can be made using the national or local norms. Examples include foreign examples: Iowa Test of Basic Skills in the US, GRE Graduate Record Examination in US. 3. Miller's Analogy Test of Achievement in USA. Then local examples: 1. Achievement Test in Mathematics, Science, English, Social Studies and Yoruba by Adedibu Ojerinde. 2. Test of Basic Mathematics Understanding by B.M. Oshibudu. 3. Scale of Motivation for School Achievement SMSA by E.O. Obe. Aptitude Test. An aptitude test measures the potential for success in an area. It refers to the individual's native ability in a special area of knowledge. The individual could be successful after being trained in that area, having had the aptitude. Aptitude indicates what an individual is endowed with. Aptitude test is a test that taps potentials. There are many types of aptitude tests. Following examples: 1. GATE General Aptitude Test Battery in US. Then local examples: 1. Differential Aptitude Test by AI Ikel Tunori, Ahmadu Bello University Zaria. 2. Aptitude for Mathematics Skill by B.S. Adana. 3. Nigerian Aptitude Test by Tedro WAEC. Most states of the Federation use aptitude tests designed by Tedro Test Development and Research Office WAEC in channeling the students into programs. The Tedro has developed well over 21 aptitude tests, some of which are being used to select candidates into nursing, public service, science option, clerical training, and so on. It has been said that if counselor uses an aptitude test in combination with other tests, the whole picture of students can emerge for educational or occupational counseling. 4. Interest test. An interest is the tendency to engage in an activity for its own sake. The individual is not expecting a reward for engaging in such activity. The reward is the activity itself. This is an activity an individual will like to engage in because one likes doing it. Interests are related to academic success, job satisfaction, and eventual adjustment and pleasures in life. Interests could be in different areas like musical, mechanical, outdoor, persuasive, clerical field, activities, and so on. Interest test therefore measures interest in these different areas. There are many examples of interest tests and they are mostly referred to as inventories. Then following examples: 1. Strong vocational interest blank, the USA. Coda preference scale, USA. 3. Thornstone interest inventory, USA. 5. Personality test. Personality refers to the more enduring characteristics of an individual. It is a typical behavior that has to do with individuals' traits, needs, aversions, emotions, attitudes, anxieties, temperaments, and so on. If, for example, after taking alcohol, one exhibits a type of behavior, this behavior is not a typical behavior. It has not come within the individual, so it cannot give a permanent explanation of the individual's behavior. It is temporary. Personality test is a test that measures individuals' personal traits, needs, aversions, and so on. There are also many types of these tests. A. For foreign examples, we have 1. Rorschach projective test. 2. Thematic appreciation test. 3. Hirsnake personality inventory. 4. Taylor manifest anxiety scale or general anxiety. 5. Salanson test anxiety scale. For local examples, we have 1. APDI, Adolescent Personal Data Inventory by Professor J.O. Akimboye. 2. SPI, Student Problem Inventory by CGM Bakari. 3. SBS, Stress Behavior Scale by Professor G.O. Akimboye. There are many types of attitude tests. For foreign examples, we have 1. Show and write attitude scales to different school subjects. 2. Show and write attitude scales to teachers. For local examples, we have 1. Sentence completion test on attitude towards old age by E.T. Bickerstead. 2. Attitude towards 1. Self. 2. Teachers by Ifedayo R. Boyibodi. 3. The School Attitude Questionnaire by E. Olomolaye. 4. Menopause Symptoms Questionnaire by A.O. Busari. 7. Vocational Interest Inventory by C.M.G. Bakari. SHI. Students Habit Inventory by C.M.G. Bakari. MOPS. Motivation for Occupational Preferences by C.M.G. Bakari. SIS. Subject Interest Survey by E.O. Obe. NIP. Unsuka Interest Profile by J.K. Esuman. OPQ. Occupational Perception Questionnaire by B. Ipaye. Each of the psychological tests has its own specific uses and functions. In some cases, a psychological test may be used for more than one purpose. The summary of the uses and functions are given below. 1. Mental ability or intelligence test. A. Can be used for the instructional evaluation of learning outcomes, for learning diagnosis, that is, detecting problems areas so that learning can be directed to a less problem area. B. Helps in allocating differential assignments within the class. C. Guiding and counseling students or clients on vocational, educational, and personal issues. D. helps in dividing students into groups. E. Provides information for outside agencies. F. Selecting students for promotion into the next level of academic pursuit. A. Used for selection into an academic course or training. B. For grouping of students. C. For diagnosing learning problems. 3. Aptitude test. Mostly used for educational and vocational guidance. B. Selection into various careers. C. Placement into job and classification into various types of groups for the purpose of specialization. D. Used for research purposes. 4. Interest test. A. Mostly used for vocational guidance. B. Diagnosing learning problems. C. Useful in the area of job placement. D. Selecting group leaders, values, and likes. E. Evaluation of teachers. F. Can also be used for educational guidance. 5. Personality test. A. Mostly used in the area of personal psychological counseling. B. Also useful in vocational counseling. C. In classification and placement for job. D. For research purposes. 6. Aptitude test. A. Mostly used in personal counseling. B. Also used in vocational counseling because an individual attitude towards a job might determine an individual going into it or not. C. Evaluating the class teacher. D. Selecting of subjects for final internal and external examination. E. For vocational and educational guidance. Limitations of psychological tests. A. Set down patterns of response and do not give enough room for client's explanation of reasons for behaving in a particular way. Therefore, psychological tests only approximate the true situation of things. B. It does not measure precisely human behavior which is too complex. C. Psychological tests may not always get the true situation of things. D. It may encourage faking on the part of the client. E. Sometimes tests may be biased by the tester. Hence, test data may not be regarded as objective. F. The bias may be as a result of personal factors. G. A single test might not give the counselor what he wants. Hence, a combination of more than one may be necessary in some counseling situation. H. Sometimes a test may be culturally biased. That is, some tests can only be used within the limits of certain culture. Not all tests are culture fair tests. Test selection, administration, and interpretation. 1. Test selection. For a test to be useful, it must be carefully selected by the counselor. Apart from this, the counselor must ensure that such test is valid, reliable, available, costless in terms of money, time, and effort, and possesses all other psychometric properties of a standard test. 2. The counselor must read thoroughly and be aware of the details of the test in the test manual. Failure to do this may leave the counselor in the dark as to the function of the test, the detailed instruction for administration, key to the interpretation, norms for different reference group, and evidence of reliability and validity. The counselor should also consider variables such as educational level of the client, the language of the test, age of the client, and some other cultural variables, and the types of problems at hand before making his choice. 2. Test administration. Psychological tests should be administered as contained in the test manual. Usually, tests can be administered either individually or in groups depending on the nature of test and the confidentiality involved. The test environment must be quiet, well lighted, highly ventilated, and comfortable. All forms of distractions should be avoided. Testees should be guided on how to complete the questionnaire. Psychological tests are rarely timed. For example, interest, attitude, and personality scales are not timed. Testees should be allowed to complete the test at their pace. Scoring of the test should be done strictly as contained in the test manual. 3. Test interpretation. This is the next stage after scoring and data analysis. It is a process of giving meanings to the analyzed data. This requires a special skill and should only be done by those who are skilled in it. To this end, various principles and techniques guide test interpretation. Denga 1981 outlined these principles and techniques as follows. A. The client should be told the purpose of a test before interpreting the test data. B. Specify the norms being used and interpret with and not with the client or student. C. Emphasize strong points more than the weak points, but ensure that the counselor discusses the weak points as well. D. The counselor must take caution with special terms, e.g. mental retardation, imbeciles, and describe in ranges and not specific scores. E. The third person should be used when discussing the results. For example, person who scores in this range will probably do better in this area. F. The scores of the test must be communicated in an honest way. G. The counselor should be alert to the feelings of the client who may become uncomfortable with the awareness of his or her abilities of the result of the test. H. All diagnoses should be taken as tentative, especially with young people. This is because this group of people are still growing. I. There may still be change in the measured trait in future. J. Test data and result must be absolutely confidential. K. The counselor is expected to give accurate information and to avoid false claims or misconceptions when making any statement to the public about test and testing. Summary of study session. In this study session, you have learned that 1. A psychological test can be defined as a set of standard stimuli, questions, puzzles, exercises, and so on, presented to the individual, a learner, client, or other persons in order to assess the person's behavior. 2. A standardized test is a test that has been constructed according to strict psychometric principles and which also contains standard items, standard conditions for administration, and standard conditions for scoring, interpretation, and is norm-referenced, which means it must have been administered to a norm group or groups so that an individual score is compared to the scores of the norm group or groups. 3. One of the notable differences between an ordinary test and standardized or psychological test is that ordinary test is not a standardized test. 4. Psychological tests are classified on the basis of what they are out to test. Hence, there are 6 basic types of tests which can be used by the school counselor in a guidance and counseling program. These tests are mental ability or intelligence test, achievement test, aptitude test, interest test, personality test, and attitude test. 5. Test selection. For a test to be useful, it must be carefully selected by the counselor. Apart from this, the counselor must ensure that such test is valid, reliable, available, costless in terms of money, time, and effort, and possesses all other psychometric properties of a standard test. 6. Test administration. Psychological tests should be administered as contained in the test manual. Usually, tests can be administered either individually or in groups depending on the nature of test and the confidentiality involved. 7. Interpretation. This is the next stage after scoring and data analysis. It is a process of giving meaning to the analyzed data. This is the end of study session 11. Thanks for listening.